What I get from you, and we'll talk about Lula later, but what I get from you is a real sense of frustration that you had 2 terms in the presidential office and you were not able to change the political culture.
You're right. In the case,
why? Why
in the
did
case
you
of
fail?
political culture, you are right. I changed the country, I suppose.
Well, I'm not sure that you... Do you really believe that? I mean, again, I'm sorry to quote so many of your own words.
In terms of the economy, yes, no doubt.
Yeah, but let's go beyond the economy, because you said... And there's a sense of frustration in what you said. My government, you said, made education universal. Yes. But for what? What they now teach in schools is a disaster.
No. Why?
Well, that's what you said.
Yes, I said. But why? Because our problem was to give access to the population, to the schools. Now it's a problem of quality.
You were seen as a man who was a technocrat, perhaps even seen as a neoliberal by some in economic terms. You certainly hastened the pace of privatization. And yet, for all of your structural economic reforms, you couldn't solve the problem of the 2 Brazils. That is, the middle class and the successful upper class in Brazil, who are a very tiny minority, and then the vast numbers, the millions and millions of Brazilians who live in poverty. And you couldn't, for all of your reforms, tackle that problem of poverty.
You are wrong. Sorry. Because I started, not me, even before, but anyhow, we started a program of transformations in Brazil, and the results are coming. I give you the last result. Last result was about the reduction of poverty. The poverty reduction was very impressive in Brazil. Basically, from 1995 on up to today, the poverty line was 40%, now it's about 28%.
But Mr. Cardoso, if I may interrupt, many Brazilians will say, actually, poverty reduction became much more successful and speeded up after you left office and after Lula came into power, because Lula spent much more money on social programs, including the very well-known Bolsa Familiar, which has lifted millions of people from abject poverty.
No, I agree with you, but I started. So the change of the Brazilian situation started with the stabilization program during the government of President Itamar Franco.
All right, well whoever takes the credit.
All social programs started in my government and have been, they are better off now because it's normal that.
Are you now, reflecting on what happened in your presidency and also under Lula, are you now saying that, actually, I've learned there are limits to market economics as applied to a country like Brazil? You can take privatization and neoliberalism too far.
Let me see. I never was a new liberal, to start with. I'm in favor of the market economy, but I'm also in favor of a very active action by government, by the state. I decided not to privatize some enterprise, meanwhile I decided to privatize others. I agree with you, but I started. So the change of the Brazilian situation started with the stabilization program during the government of President Itamar Franco.
All right, well whoever takes the credit.
All social programs started in my government and have been, they are better off now because it's normal that.
Are you now, reflecting on what happened in your presidency and also under Lula, are you now saying that, actually, I've learned there are limits to market economics as applied to a country like Brazil? You can take privatization and neoliberalism too far.
Let me see. I never was a new liberal, to start with. I'm in favor of the market economy, but I'm also in favor of a very active action by government, by the state. I decided not to privatize some enterprise, meanwhile I decided to privatize others.
The President should give a clear lead on the issue of corruption.
Well, I think so.
Well, in that case, did you give a clear lead? You had 2 terms in office. What kind of lead did you give your country?
Well, you don't have any one case of a person in my government, indicted or something like that, being safeguarded by me.
Well, that brings me to the essence of my case, if I may say so, because, as I understand it, you appointed a federal prosecutor general, Geraldo Brindero, who sat in office for years and received, according to the Brazilian press, over 600 inquiries, I think they're called, into criminal behavior by public officials. Now, the vast majority of those inquiries were simply filed away. I think he even developed a nickname in Brazil as the sort of the filing clerk.
Yeah.
Now, is that because you're telling me there was no wrongdoing at all in power when you were president, or is it simply because he sat on those allegations?
Let me put very clear to you that in Brazil, the fiscal is absolutely independent from the executive branch. Absolutely independent.
But you appointed him.
Yes, but he's independent. He judged by himself.
You say, and you've said it again on this program, Lula has to give a lead. Lula has to be strong.
Yes, but
are you telling me there were no charges brought against any MPs or any members of your government over an 8-year period? Are you telling me that politics was entirely clean?
Could you give me the name of one?
No, I'm just asking, do you think politics was entirely clean?
No one has been...
but the fact nobody was charged perhaps suggests that
or even accused by the press. No one minister. No one. And I think that's possible to trust that Brazil has a good future, provide the Brazilian ruling class will be much more sensitive to against corruption and more concerned with internal domestic situation.
Fernando Henrique Cardoso, thank you very much for being on Hard Talk.